My name is Angela Barbash. As Marcy had said, I'm the founder of an organization called Reconsider. We are down in Ypsilanti. We're a research and development firm, and our mission is to nurture the social impact economy in the Great Lakes region. So that's an economy that is comprised of businesses who are both doing well and doing good at the same time. They're often called social enterprises. I would really consider all businesses that are involved in the local food movement to be social enterprises, because your passion is not just for growing food or running a business and making profit, but generally, as I found with the food sector, your passion is to nurture the soil that food is coming from and to nurture the people who that food is going to. So we have Reconsider. We launched in 2012. We've done a ton of research. We helped to get legislation passed last year, which I'll touch on a bit, and that's called the MILE Act, Michigan Invests Locally Exemption. We also incubated an investment advisory firm called Revalue, and we spun that out last summer. Revalue works with investors and only with investors who want to align their financial decisions with their values. And I can tell you across the board, all of our investors support local food and are interested in investing in local food-based businesses, either processing, producing, or distributing. And really up until now, there have been no investment advisory firms in Michigan who were coalescing that type of investor energy and directing it toward specific sectors that those investors were excited about. So this is all new work in Michigan. So there's two things I'd like to touch on very briefly, and then I'm going to yield the floor to my co-panelists, and I'll accept your questions later. The first is, let me go back to the MILE Act. So you can find information about this act through an MSU research paper that we produced and published in August in partnership with MSU. It's on our website. Our website is timetoreconsider.com. Essentially, what the MILE Act does is it allows any business in Michigan to raise capital from investors who are in Michigan. And it doesn't matter if you know them or not, and it doesn't matter if they are what's called accredited or non-accredited or not. Accredited means that they have over $1 million in net worth or make over $200,000 a year, and that's about 7% of the U.S. population. And the barrier up to this point for businesses or for entrepreneurs is that if you wanted to raise capital from your local community, there was no legal way for you to do that and to broadcast that message to the community. Now you can do that. As of December 30th, you can do that in Michigan. So that research paper on our website spells out everything you need to know about the MILE Act, including the language of the bill itself. So you'll get a lot of answers to your questions about raising capital from the community in that paper. The second thing I'd like to point out, our experiment and the question that we want to answer is what would happen if you saturated an entire county market with information about how investors can invest locally, about how businesses can raise community capital from people in the community, and about how stakeholders, which are the educators among us, the public officials, the attorneys, the business consultants, all those people who are either influencing businesses or influencing investors or influencing the public, how those stakeholders could make the connection and help the investors and the businesses connect. If you saturated a market and then with information and engage them in a conversation about how local capital would really significantly change their community in the next 5 years, and then you gave them specific action steps, what would result? So that's an experiment, and this is the first time that anybody has done this type of experiment with this type of comprehensive approach anywhere in the country. And so we were getting calls from the national circuit saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe you guys have done this in Michigan. And you guys really are taking a huge leap forward. And other states and other counties in Michigan are starting to watch what we're doing to see what the successes and the lessons learned are from that. So that program, that whole campaign is called Venture Local. That has just launched, and it'll run through early April. It's about a 6-month campaign. Our first event is actually on Thursday night in Ann Arbor, and we may have 3 or 4 seats left at that event. So if you're in the Ann Arbor area or you have family in Ann Arbor, you can go check out this event. The website for the campaign is venturelocalmi.org. and the full website is going to be up in about a week or two. Right now, there's just a very simple splash page where you can sign up for e-news. I'm going to leave it at that. I could literally talk about this stuff all day. I get really excited about this, but I will turn it over to my panelists, my co-panelists, and I look forward to getting your guys' questions. Thanks.
So next, I would like to introduce Stephen Arellano. And so he has an amazing background in working to create change in the food system, really for over 10 years. He was the co-founder of the local grocer in the Flint Farmers Market, which is a 4-season production of naturally grown produce, microgreens, homemade pastas and jams, and other local food products. And I'm sure you've all heard great things about the new Flint Farmers Market. So I would like to introduce Stephen and have him give his words of wisdom.
I'm just curious how many people in here have already been able to attract money to their project or their new business launch, like local dollars. When they asked me to be part of this panel, the first thing I said is, people know how to do that? Because it's really, really hard in a weak market city like Flint, Michigan, with very, very little expendable cash. Very few people who are making good money, and you are fighting with, say, your investment in a small food business that's not going to yield a huge return, that over a long term may pay back some money, and you're against people who are really dealing with the most pressing urban issues of our times in our city that are just far more important to most people's reckoning when they're doing that. So that said, I have not been able to leverage a lot of local private investment dollars. And I think what Lynn was saying when we were talking before, you said, what I do is I help people get ready to receive money. These are all the things you got to do to be ready. So when that opportunity happens, when that card is flipped up right and somebody sees it and says, I want to invest in that, you have all your things in place. And Angela was talking about getting the investment community ready and organized to be able to invest in things locally. In Flint, I've had to take a little bit more of an approach of getting the system and the culture of the city to a point where the local food idea of it, it's rippling impacts throughout health and your income levels and prosperity and everything else, and sustainability is part of what people think of when they think of our city. And banging away at my stall in the farmers market has been one conversation after another for 2 years with people about why, when you buy my bag of salad greens for more money than you're used to spending for it, how it benefits me, what the health benefits are, because in the kind of local food stuff that we're working, your pitch is a lot more than your story in my book. It's how does it affect the economy, the environment, the health. There's so many ways that our food system work impacts different sectors, and those impacts resonate to a greater or lesser degree with every individual. So it's really finding out where people are on just a person one-on-one basis, and doing that kind of cranking is what I found as what helped me build a customer base that said they know what my product is, they appreciate who I am and what I'm about, and they're willing to spend more. Now, are they willing to invest? Would they give me $10,000 for a new hoop house for my farm? Would they give me $5,000 for pasta equipment so I can scale up the production of my handmade noodles, which are really, really handmade, and I have great forearms, but I can't meet the demand, So for me, it's more a question of scaling up without too much of a business record. So when I go to the classic investment sources, I go to, even the micro loans that are set up for food, they want 3 years of taxes and business records, or if I'm a new farmer and I don't have enough experience, how do I get some access to some of the farm capital? And so as a very brand new startup, what I've been trying to do in my consulting work when I'm not making pasta or farming or at the market is serving as a trustee for the Community Foundation in Greater Flint. I work with every single project that I can get a hold of And I've positioned myself in my city as somebody who, when dollars are made available for work in the food system, I'm one of the people that gets called, and I know enough people to be able to say, well, you should talk to those people and those people. So we're at least taking advantage of what's an unprecedented time in the availability of funding from federal and state sources for the kind of work we do. It's not going to get, who knows if it's going to get better than this, but it's never been this good. And even your community, to take advantage of those dollars, there needs to be a lot of organization, there needs to be some advocates, there needs to be institutions in government that are leading, and they're already prepped and they understand why it's important. It's part of their strategic plan. It's part of the community's master and economic plans. And so I guess in terms of having a strategy, mine has been to be the person who they turn to so I can help steer those dollars towards a program that has more readily available grant dollars to get new businesses started up for those early things that they need. So, I don't want to talk for too long. I guess what I can help with is the multiple layers of funding. That's what I do really well. I'm a former private foundation funder program officer for many years. So I've had a chance to work on a lot of different levels, and now I'm a broke farmer trying to get money from people like who I used to be. So I know what it's like to be on both sides of that coin. But yeah, really for me, I guess my main message is getting your community ready if you're in one of these weak market cities where there isn't a lot of private investment. Through the Community Foundation, I guess I'll stop with that. Through the Community Foundation as a trustee, I was I advocated really hard for us to take on local food issues. And then we created a Gen Forward network, which is all of the, sort of 20, 30, 40 somethings professionals in Flint, whether you could only give $50 a year or you could give more than that. We got all those people together, and now we have some grants to just help some local people. So we did that kind of organizing, and now we have a new institution that has some local money on the table, because when you go for bigger federal dollars or that kind of thing, who's your local money that matches the money that you're trying to leverage from the outside? If you don't have skin in the game and you don't have people willing to put time and effort and administrative resources into receiving money for your community, you're not going to be in a position as a community in the same way that if you don't have a two-sided business card or know your numbers, that when you're ready, you're not going to be ready as an individual. So I'm thinking of it a lot more as a community-based strategy. I see a lot of excellent work around the community or different cities in the state of organizing and trying to leverage. And I'd be really interested to hear from everybody else who raised their hand, like, how are you, how are you getting access to money? Because I think we're right on the edge of small food system, small scale farming or small scale processing is really going to have to prove itself in the marketplace, at least from my vantage point. Like, can we really make a good living at that, or are we just, kind of like the cool foodie people who, die broke? I wonder that when I'm sitting out in my farm. But yeah, so it just feels like we're at this moment of, we've built a movement. There are people everywhere, all around the state. I think leadership understands the importance of what we're doing. So the getting is really good right now. So I'm interested in the conversation that comes after about how we all make that happen.
If you're looking at individuals, you can do an investment crowdfunding campaign. So you can check out how other people have done that by going to localstake.com, STAKE.com. And you can see how other people have raised capital. You generally need, if you're going to do an online capital raise like that, and you can do it as a nonprofit, it would be a loan, or these farmers can do it as individuals. You generally need to be raising $50,000 or more. So if you're raising less than $50,000, that's where it gets really difficult. You kind of have to do a private, word of mouth sort of capital raise, where you are identifying through your board, through the people who care about your organization. You're working with them to identify potential investors in the community. If you are raising over $50,000 though, go check out, consider an investment crowdfunding campaign, and you can do it. I mean, there are investors, and that's the work that we're trying to do, is really, coordinate and energize those investors and get them pointed in the direction of all of you, so to speak.
Stephen?
Well, I mean, I'll jump in on other sources of grant funding. And my message on that is to just be as creative as possible. There are semantic gymnastics that you can perform to make your farm essential for homeland security. I am not joking. Like, I have been on Capitol Hill making this very argument, and there's a good point to be made for a secure local food supply, right? And it's to when you get past laughing and you're in my shoes going, no, I'm serious, that you start thinking about, the way the therapeutic benefits of farming and hooking up with one of those organizations. And what I've seen happen is you find the folks who get what you're doing and circulate among those to find who will get with you, whether it's a Boys and Girls Club or a prisoner reentry program or a after-school youth program. There's so many different ways where people are recognizing the value of farming in particular, but then how do you cross over, which is what I brought up in my presentation, from the foundation farming to spinning off farmers that can make a living, which, that's another question mark for me.
I want to give you two other things to think about really quickly. And these really depend on your location, but especially for processors, retailers, those types of things, make sure you touch base with your local downtown development authority if you have one and if it applies to you. You never know what kind of resources they can throw your way. Usually not cash, but sometimes there are things like business resources, encouragement, training, and lots of things. So don't count them out. They've been very, very useful.
And I don't know who has in your community, if you have like all the Lions Club,
Yep.
Kiwanis Club, those are not only a place to get money, but when you give your pitch at one of those meetings, you're meeting the investors in your community, or at least a portion of them.
Definitely.
So to be in front of those folks and have your card ready and impress them with a presentation is a way to say, well, I might get a couple of $1,000s from them, but I might also afterwards shake hands with somebody who can connect me with other things. Like, that's the place to be.
Definitely. And they're always begging for speakers too. So
Yep.
just by offering to speak, they'll think you're the greatest thing on earth. So
Yep.
the other place that I would encourage all of you, especially the smallest of businesses, is there is a wonderful resource directory online through the Microenterprise Network at CEDM, the Community Economic Development Association of Michigan, and it's very easy to find. And I have cards up here, but if you want to write it down, it's micro.cedam.info. And there are all kinds of resources on there, and adding more every day for trainings and funders and all kinds of things. And you're welcome to add your resources on there as well. So take a look at that and see if you find anything in your area that's useful for you. For one thing, it's very challenging to find grants that are for businesses. So if you are a nonprofit, there's a lot more available out there. If you are a business, it's pretty slim pickings to find grant. But you're exactly right. Very few organizations can rely just on grant funding. So that's a super point.
Well,
Any other comments?
I would say, you're absolutely right about that, and a lot of folks who go that route end up being only like sort of a slave to the next grant and filling those requirements and doing that. That's certainly, making that transition is really hard. I just wanted to throw in the room the idea that I hope people are aware of, but like you were saying, you can't give a grant to a private entity like a business. Or
There's a few.
There's a few people can. Community foundations in your community can do that. But also, and I have not seen it put to good use in this state, but the PRIs, are folks familiar with that?
I can speak to that.
You can? Because I would love to hear some. Do people know it? It stands for program-related investment. They're also mission-related investments. And my understanding, before I pass it over, is just a foundation has $100 million in their endowment. They don't spend their endowment, they invest that to make more money, and they're bound by law to spend 5% a year of their endowment. So hopefully they're making more in the investments than they are giving away and growing the foundation, but they are starting to invest small portions of those endowment funds into things that are associated with the foundation's mission or program specific. So like Kellogg is investing in food with their grants, why wouldn't they be investing with their endowment as well? So that's out there.
So as he had said, PRI and MRI are the two acronyms that you would want to Google search and learn a little bit more about. There's only a handful of foundations in Michigan that are currently doing PRI and MRI work. They include Kellogg and the Fisher Foundation, and I believe the Kresge and maybe Ford Foundations. What was the other one? Skillman, yeah, thank you. Skillman's doing PRI.
Muskegon is.
And Muskegon is, that's great. Is that a community foundation?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, Flint too.
That's great. So is anybody by show of hands familiar with RSF Social Finance, national organization? So they're actually pulling together with BALI, which is the Business Alliance for Local Living Economies, they're pulling together a community foundation circle. It's really like a fellowship program for the investment officers at community foundations or family foundations. They don't really care what kind of foundation you are, but pulling these people together to teach them about how to do this, because most foundations have just never done this. They've always invested their corpus and their endowment funds, but only in traditional investments, just like the rest of us have, in mutual funds or index funds or maybe socially responsible investment mutual funds. But they have rarely actually invested in local communities and in local businesses. So it's a new conversation. Don't be surprised if you approach your local foundations and they've either never talked about this internally or they're just starting to talk about it internally and they're terrified because they're afraid they're going to risk all of their money and then they're going to have a problem with their funders, their grantors.
So does anybody know about LC3,
Yes.
L3C.
L3C?
Yeah.
So that's, I think a lot of what we're talking about and the challenges that I'm facing and I hear other people facing has to do with this public-private borderline, like being a private business or being a nonprofit. The money for food stuff right now is all coming from, charitable sources and government sources as grants, and we're trying to make businesses. And L3C is kind of like a hybrid public-private. There are some conditions in which you can receive grant money for free because L is low profit, limited liability corporation. So you have a social mission as formalized or something? I don't know.
Yeah, so L3Cs, this is, if anybody's familiar with B Corps or benefit corporations, it's happening in other states. B Corp legislation is stalled here in Michigan. It has been for the last 5 years, but L3Cs made its way through as a new type of incorporation status, and it's basically an LLC. You're not a nonprofit, it's just an LLC, and what we've heard across the state from people who have started their businesses as L3Cs is that the benefit they're really getting out of it is marketing, because you can very quickly and very easily explain right in the name of your business, Blue Ribbon Farms L3C, and people ask you, what does L3C mean? And so you can quickly say that means I'm a low profit limited liability company, which means that I'm really focused on having a high impact and not trying to make it, extract as much wealth out of my consumer base as possible. What I've heard from foundations, though, on the PRI and MRI conversation is that the L3C model was created to try to attract that kind of capital, and that hasn't quite happened yet.
Right.
The foundations are not very clear. The IRS has not been clear with the foundations about whether they are compromising their legal status as tax-exempt organizations in the way that they are by investing in L3Cs. The IRS is kind of refusing to rule on it, which means that any foundation that does it is really taking a risk with their entire charter. And that puts a foundation in pretty uneasy shoes. So that's what I've heard from foundations over the last 12 to 24 months. If any of you are aware of foundations who are investing in L3Cs with PRI or MRI money, please drop us an email at inquire@timetoreconsider.com, because that's a type of information that we like to blast out to the rest of our constituents and our email list. We have an email list of about 1,300 people. Okay, so donation-based crowdfunding, which is Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Patronicity, which is our local homegrown platform in Detroit. You are not getting your money back. In return, you're getting maybe a t-shirt, or you're getting a gift certificate to the business, or you might be even getting a CSA share in your guys' case for the farmers, but you're not getting your money back. And it's just a donation, and because you all, many of you that are doing these campaigns are for-profit businesses, it's not even write-off, it's just a donation. It's a great way to raise capital though, because you don't have to pay that money back, and it creates a customer base to some degree, and it's a huge marketing play more than it is a capital raise play, I would say, because it still takes a lot of time, 3 to 6 months, to really execute a quality crowdfunding campaign. But since Kickstarter started, launched in 2009, $5.2 billion with a B of money has flooded into crowdfunding campaigns. This is no small potatoes, so to speak. So so investment crowdfunding, you're getting your money back, hopefully. You're hopefully getting your money back. There's at least a promise to try to return your money, knowing that there could be a failure there in returning the money. But it's an investment, so that means that the interest on that loan, or and that's the most common, is it's a loan, not equity, or if you were doing equity, the earnings on that equity, you would report that as investment income on your taxes. And I want everybody to hear me here. The largest barrier for investors is that entrepreneurs don't understand their financials. So we can all work with people to craft the story, right? We can give a beautiful pitch. We can have the best branding. We can know our market. We can know our customers. We can know our differentiation. We can know all those things. But if you're standing in front of investors and you cannot explain the numbers, or you can't explain the rationale for the numbers, or you can't show that there is a way to actually return the capital to the investors with a return on investment, and it doesn't have to be a large return on investment. Most impact investors are looking for 2, 3, 4%, 5%, 6% at most. I mean, it's not a ton. But if you can't demonstrate that you have a thorough understanding, or that someone on your team has a thorough understanding of those numbers, an investor will pass up and pass up and pass up every opportunity until they find that story that is backed by numbers. So that's the one lesson I want all of you entrepreneurs to take home, is you have to know those numbers inside and out.